My name is Audrey M. Bruner, and I'm 27 years old. If you'd asked me a week before my wedding what my life looked like, I would have said, steady, quietly happy in that unflashy, dependable way people don't brag about online, but secretly hope for. Matt and I had been together for 3 years, and nothing about us felt volatile or dramatic. We argued about dishes and whose turn it was to pick a show, about whether the thermostat should be up or down at night, about things that ended in eye rolls and laughter, not slammed doors. We were engaged planning a wedding that felt like a formality because in my mind we'd already chosen each other. I trusted him in that deep, lazy way that comes from consistency. That's important to say because what happened next didn't shatter a fragile relationship. It cracked something I thought was solid. Matt had a best friend named Sarah. I knew her from the beginning. He never hid her existence or minimized their closeness. They'd been friends since high school, the kind of history that came with inside jokes and shared memories I wasn't part of. At first, I told myself that was healthy proof he was capable of long-term loyalty. Sarah had a boyfriend of 6 years, so the idea that she could be a threat honestly never crossed my mind. We'd hung out plenty of times. Dinners, group events, birthdays. She was polite, friendly enough, and if I'm being honest, a little bland. I never got the sense she disliked me. I thought we were fine. I thought she was fine. That illusion shattered on a random weeknight when Matt told me we needed to talk. He didn't say it dramatically. No raised voice. No pacing. Just a shift in his posture, like someone bracing before impact. We were sitting on the couch, half watching something neither of us cared about, when he muted the TV and looked at me with a seriousness that made my stomach drop instantly. When someone says we need to talk, your brain doesn't wait for details. It sprints ahead, cataloging worst-case scenarios. Cold feet, doubt, regret. I remember thinking, please don't let this be about the wedding. He started with, I don't want you to freak out, which is in hindsight the least comforting sentence in the English language. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears as he told me there was something he'd been meaning to say, something he hadn't known how to bring up. I nodded, barely breathing, preparing myself for a problem I assumed belonged to us. I wasn't prepared for a third person to enter the room without physically being there. Sarah told me she's in love with me. For a second, I genuinely thought I'd misheard him. I even laughed once, short and confused, like my brain was rejecting the information outright. I asked him to repeat it. He did, calmly, carefully, like this was a difficult but manageable fact. The heat rushed to my face so fast I felt dizzy. I didn't know what emotion came first, shock, embarrassment, anger, but they tangled together until I couldn't separate them. This woman I'd shared drinks with, smiled at, trusted, had apparently been harboring feelings for my fiancé for years. Matt kept talking while I sat frozen, explaining that Sarah had confessed just days earlier, saying she couldn't keep it inside anymore. She told him she'd loved him for a long time, long enough to break up with her boyfriend because she couldn't pretend otherwise. It felt surreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's story halfway through. I asked questions mechanically, like a detective trying to stay professional. When did this happen? Where were they? What exactly did she say? And most importantly, what did he say back? Matt told me he shut her down immediately, that he told her he loved me, that he was marrying me, that nothing would ever happen between them. He said he felt bad for her. That part stung more than I expected. Pity felt dangerously close to softness, and I didn't want softness anywhere near this situation. I asked him why he hadn't told me sooner. He said he didn't want to upset me during wedding week. I asked him if this was really the first time she'd crossed a line. He said yes. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But a strange unease settled in my chest, the kind that doesn't scream, it whispers. We agreed Sarah couldn't come to the wedding. That decision was easy on paper and complicated in practice. Some friends would notice. Questions would be asked. Matt sent her a message explaining it was best she stayed away. He told me she understood. I told myself that was the end of it. The days leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of fittings, last-minute plans, and forced normalcy. Every time I caught Matt looking at his phone, my mind spiraled. Every reassurance he offered helped, but only briefly. I told myself this was just pre-wedding anxiety, that love meant choosing trust, even when it was uncomfortable. The wedding itself was beautiful. Sarah wasn't there. I married the man I loved. People clapped, cried, toasted us. On the outside, everything was perfect, but somewhere beneath the vows and champagne, a quiet thought lodged itself in my mind. I wondered if this story was really over, or if it had just learned how to wait. If there's one thing I've learned about peace, it's that it can be convincing without being real. For a while after the wedding, life settled into something that almost felt normal. We moved through our days, like newly married couples are supposed to work during the week, grocery runs on Sundays, lazy mornings when neither of us bothered to get dressed until noon. Matt stopped mentioning Sarah entirely. No stories, no updates, no casual name drops. I took that silence as proof that we'd handled the situation correctly, that whatever feelings she'd confessed had burned themselves out the moment reality set in. I wanted that to be true so badly that I didn't question it. 5 months into our marriage, Matt's birthday came up. He didn't want anything big. No party, no surprises, just dinner at a restaurant we liked with family and a few close friends. 10 people tops. It sounded harmless, safe, exactly the kind of night that would reinforce the idea that we were okay. The dinner started out warm and easy. The restaurant was softly lit, all wood tables and low music, the kind of place where conversations overlap without competing. Everyone was laughing, passing plates, talking over one another, the way people do when they're comfortable. I remember watching Matt across the table at one point, smiling as he told a story and feeling a flicker of relief. See, I told myself, you were right to move on. Then I heard her voice. Oh, hey, I didn't mean to intrude. At first, my brain didn't connect the sound to a person. It was just noise breaking through the moment. But when I looked up and saw Sarah standing there, my body reacted before my mind did. My stomach dropped so hard it felt physical. My fingers went numb against the edge of the table. She stood there like she belonged, like she'd wandered into an old habit instead of a situation she should never have been part of again. She said she'd been eating alone and recognized Matt. That she didn't want to interrupt, just wanted to say happy birthday. The way she smiled, soft, tentative, made my skin crawl. I looked at Matt, waiting for him to shut it down, to nod politely and let the moment pass. Instead, he smiled back. Not an awkward smile, not a tight one, a real smile, the kind you give someone you're genuinely pleased to see. Before I could process what was happening, he said, "Why don't you join us?" The words landed like a slap. I sat there staring at him, certain I must have misheard. But Sarah was already pulling out a chair, thanking him, sliding seamlessly into the space beside us, as if she'd never been uninvited from our wedding, as if she hadn't confessed her love to my husband days before I married him. No one else at the table seemed to notice anything was wrong. They greeted her maid room, asked how she'd been. They didn't know. To them, she was just an old friend. To me, she was a boundary Matt had just stepped over without hesitation. I felt invisible. Something in me went cold. Not explosive, not dramatic, just done. I pushed my chair back slowly and stood up. "You can have my seat," I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. I didn't look at Sarah. I didn't look at Matt. I just walked away. I could feel eyes on my back as I left the restaurant, but I didn't care. Outside, the night air hit my face, and I sucked in a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My hands were shaking as I ordered a ride home. Part of me waited, expected Matt to follow me, to ask what was wrong, to choose me. He didn't. I stood there for a few minutes, staring at the door, every second stretching longer than the last. When my ride arrived, and Matt still hadn't come out, something inside me hardened. The drive home was quiet. Too quiet. My thoughts replayed the scene over and over, the smile, the invitation, the way he hadn't even glanced at me before making the decision. By the time I got home, the anger had settled into something heavier, something more dangerous. Hours passed. No text, no call. When Matt finally walked through the door nearly 2 hours later, the first thing he said wasn't, "Are you okay?" or "I'm sorry." He told me I'd overreacted. He said I embarrassed him, that I'd acted immaturely, that I'd ruined his birthday. I stared at him stunned as he explained how he'd just been trying to be polite, how he didn't think Sarah still had feelings for him, how it was no big deal. In that moment, standing in our living room, I realized something had shifted. This wasn't about a woman who loved my husband. It was about a husband who didn't see why that mattered. After that night, our apartment felt smaller. Not physically, emotionally. Like the walls had crept closer while we slept, leaving less room to breathe. We didn't talk much in the days that followed. When we did, it was surface-level logistical. Who was picking up groceries? What time one of us would be home? The kind of exchanges roommates have when they're careful not to touch something sore. I told myself we just needed time to cool off. That one bad night didn't erase 3 years of history. Still, every time I replayed the restaurant scene in my head, that image of Matt smiling at Sarah lodged itself deeper, refusing to fade. A few days later, I tried to bring it up again. Calmly, intentionally, I waited until we were both home, sitting on the couch, with nothing else demanding our attention. I didn't want another fight. I just wanted to be understood. I told him it wasn't just about Sarah showing up. It was about how quickly he'd invited her to sit down without even checking in with me, how exposed and disrespected that made me feel. I explained that knowing her history with him changed everything that context mattered. Matt listened, nodding occasionally, but his expression stayed oddly neutral. When I finished, there was a pause that felt too empty. "I don't know why you're still holding on to this," he said finally. "I already told you, I didn't think it was a big deal." That was when the frustration crept back in, sharp and unwelcome. I asked him if he truly didn't see why it upset me, if he really thought I'd reacted out of nowhere. He sighed, rubbing his face like I was exhausting him. "Honestly, I think you overreacted. It was one dinner. I was just being polite." Polite. The word echoed in my head. I reminded him again that this wasn't some random acquaintance. This was the woman who had confessed her love to him days before our wedding, who'd broken up with her boyfriend because of him. "You don't know that she's over you," I said. "You don't get to decide that for her." He looked irritated now. "I really don't think she still feels that way." And then, like it was nothing, he added, "I mean, we've texted a bit since the wedding. It's not like we completely stopped talking." The room went very quiet. "You've been texting her?" I asked. He shrugged, a few times. "Just checking in. I didn't want things to be awkward forever." It felt like something inside me cracked, not loudly, but cleanly. I asked him why he hadn't told me. If it was so insignificant, why keep it a secret? "I didn't want to upset you," he said, as if that explained everything. That was the moment it stopped being about Sarah. The realization hit me all at once. He had decided what I could and couldn't handle, and he'd chosen secrecy over honesty to avoid discomfort for himself. We argued for hours after that, not screaming, not throwing things, just talking in circles, each of us stuck in a different reality. He kept insisting it was all a misunderstanding, that I was blowing things out of proportion, that nothing actually happened, so I should let it go. I went to bed early that night, exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix. Lying in the dark, I stared at the ceiling and wondered when exactly trust had slipped through my fingers. I couldn't pinpoint the moment, but I could feel its absence. By morning, the silence between us felt permanent. And for the first time since I married Matt, I wasn't sure if love alone was going to be enough to bridge it. I didn't plan to go through his phone. That's the truth, even if it doesn't absolve me. I told myself I wouldn't become that person, the one who snoops, who looks for proof instead of trusting words. But trust wasn't something I had left to lean on. It had been chipped away slowly, disguised as politeness and avoidance, until all I had were questions Matt refused to answer directly. A few days after our last argument, I was sitting on the edge of the bed staring at the wall when Matt went to take a shower. His phone was on the nightstand. Face up. Unlock notifications lighting the screen every few minutes. I told myself I just wanted reassurance. One quick look to confirm there was nothing else. That I'd feel stupid for doubting him and move on. My hands were shaking when I picked it up. At first, everything looked normal. Family group chats, messages from coworkers, a few friends asking about weekend plans. I scrolled slowly, half hoping to find nothing, half dreading what I might. Then I opened his Instagram messages. Sarah's name was there. Not at the top, not recent enough to scream urgency, but there, existing. I opened the thread. The message wasn't dramatic. No declarations, no hearts. Just her asking how he'd been doing and whether he wanted to grab coffee sometime. Casual, careful, as if she'd learned how to knock without making noise. What made my stomach twist was the date. It was from after our last conversation, after he'd promised he wasn't talking to her anymore, and he'd replied. Just a short response. Polite, non-committal. "I'm good. Busy with work. Nothing overt. Nothing I could point to and call an affair." But it was enough, because it was another lie. I sat there staring at the screen, my chest tight, my mind oddly calm. This wasn't rage, it was clarity. He hadn't stopped. He hadn't been honest. And he hadn't told me, not because he forgot, but because he'd decided I didn't need to know. When Matt came out of the bathroom towel around his waist, humming softly, I didn't look up at first. I was afraid if I did, I'd explode. So I said, finally holding up his phone, "When were you going to tell me Sarah messaged you again?" His face drained of color. He tried to downplay it to say it was just one message, that he didn't even plan on meeting her. His words blurred together as I tossed the phone onto the bed between us. You lied, I said. Again. That night, I slept in the guest room. Alone. Staring at the ceiling like I had before, except this time, I wasn't wondering what might be happening. I already knew. Something changed in me after that night in the guest room. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was quiet, like a switch being flipped without ceremony. I stopped waiting for Matt to say the right thing. I stopped replaying arguments in my head, imagining better outcomes. I didn't even feel the urge to check his phone again. I was tired in a way that went deeper than exhaustion. I was done chasing reassurance. We lived like polite strangers for days, passed each other in the hallway, shared the kitchen without really sharing the space. He slept in the bedroom. I stayed where I was. The distance between us felt intentional, like both of us were afraid that closing it would force a decision neither of us wanted to make yet. When Matt finally asked if we could talk, his voice sounded smaller than usual, less defensive. I followed him into the living room and sat across from him, not beside him. That felt important. He apologized. Again. He said he knew he'd messed up, that he never meant to hurt me, that he didn't think the messages were a big deal, but could see now that they were. He said he'd stop talking to Sarah for good, that he'd do whatever it took to fix things. I listened quietly, not because I was convinced, but because I wanted to see if anything in me still reacted the way it used to. It didn't. I asked him why honesty had been so hard, why avoiding discomfort mattered more than protecting our marriage. He struggled to answer, said he thought telling me would only cause another fight, that he was trying to keep the peace. You weren't keeping the peace, I told him. You were keeping secrets. That seemed to land differently. He looked at me like he was seeing the problem clearly for the first time, or maybe he just realized how close he was to losing me. I love you, he said. I don't want to lose you. I believed that part. Love wasn't the issue. It never was. I don't know if love is enough anymore, I said quietly. I can't keep living like I'm bracing for the next thing you don't tell me. He reached for my hand. I pulled mine back, not out of anger, but self-preservation. I told him I needed time. Real time. Not a night, not a weekend. Space to think without being pressured to forgive. He didn't argue. He just nodded. That scared me more than any fight. The space I asked for wasn't dramatic. I didn't pack a bag or announce a separation. I just stayed where I was, in the guest room, in my own head, in a quiet I hadn't allowed myself since everything started unraveling. Matt didn't push. He didn't knock on the door late at night or send long messages trying to explain himself. In a strange way, that restraint felt like another test one I wasn't sure he even realized he was taking. Days passed, then a week. I paid attention to how my body reacted to the idea of staying versus leaving. When I imagined fixing things, therapy rules, promises, I felt tight, like I was preparing to monitor my own marriage. When I imagined walking away, I felt grief, yes, but also relief. That scared me. Relief shouldn't come with the thought of ending something you fought for. But it did. Matt tried again once. He told me he'd blocked Sarah everywhere, showed me his phone without being asked, promised transparency, promised change. I didn't doubt his sincerity in that moment. I doubted his consistency. I believe you mean it, I told him. I just don't know if I can unlearn what I've learned about us. He asked if there was anything he could do, anything at all, to make me stay. The question wasn't manipulative. It was desperate, and for a moment I almost gave him a list. Rules, boundaries, conditions. Then I realized something important. I didn't want to become the person who had to enforce them. So I told him the truth, that the lesson wasn't for him alone. It was for me, that I'd learned I could love someone deeply and still walk away when trust eroded too far, that I didn't need proof of betrayal to honor my own limits, that being chosen half-heartedly, even politely, wasn't enough. I didn't scream. I didn't expose anyone. I didn't seek revenge. I simply stopped participating in a triangle I never agreed to be part of. When I finally packed my things, Matt helped me carry the boxes to the car. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He just stood there, watching consequences arrive quietly. I never spoke to Sarah again. I didn't need to. Whatever fantasy she'd held on to dissolved the moment I removed myself from the equation. Whatever comfort Matt had found in avoiding conflict vanished when there was no one left to reassure him. The lesson they didn't expect wasn't punishment. It was absence.